mind-blowing last 4 days. On the plus side, I had an amazing time at 2 pop-ups with my small business. That was incredible. Met some incredible people, and also, saw people that I, do pop-ups with quite a bit. So that was the really good part of my weekend. Also, there's a video up on the Facebook page, A Theo's Dream. One of the hosts did a really awesome video about our products, our historically inspired jewelry, and our all-natural beauty supplies. So I want to thank her on all of that. That was a really neat video, and uh, I love the community out there. It's really amazing. So, but, and I just woke up, so I'm a little groggy. But I had to talk about this. So, I live in an apartment, and starting Friday night, the sink started filling with water, threatening to flood my apartment. I put in a work order, and nothing happened Saturday. Continued to have to bail water out of my sink with a bucket multiple times Saturday. Sunday is when it got really fun. So Sunday morning, this kept happening. I called their emergency maintenance line, left a voicemail, and told them, like I had told in the work order, that my sink is backing up. I looked it up. I believe it's a collapsed water line. It is flooding my apartment, because when I woke up Sunday morning, a quarter of my kitchen had standing water in it. And I had bailed the sink out, bailed the water out right before I went to bed. And while I slept that night, it overflowed onto my floor. Well, all Sunday, nothing was done, even though I called the emergency maintenance line, left a message, had put in the work order Friday night. And so I worked a really long shift yesterday, being Monday, and I come home and I barely opened the door before the smell hit me. It smelled like sewage water. And I was like, oh my gosh, like you had to hold your breath to go in there. And so I went into the kitchen, and every inch of my kitchen floor was underwater, and there was black sludge, nasty smelling water all the way to the brim of my sink. It had gotten on the floor, it had gotten on the counters, and I was so angry that I was shaking. These people had all day yesterday to do something about this. So I walked outside of my apartment. I stood on the patio for a little bit, and I was like, what can I do about this? Who can I call? Because I'm not being taken seriously. So while I'm standing there, I happen to see someone come out of the office building. I'm like, oh my gosh, they're still open. Because this is like 5 o'clock in the evening. I had just gotten home from work. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to go in there. And they better have something good to tell me about this, because this is a health hazard. I cannot sleep and live in this. Before yesterday, it was just, kind of dirty, slightly bleach smelling water, but not black sludge. So I march over to the office and I go in, and there's a couple other people there, but they're not in line or really doing anything. So the lady comes and she's like, "Hi, can I help you?" I said, "Yeah, I tell her who I was and what apartment number I was, and I said, I have put in work order on Friday. I called y'all's emergency line on Sunday. I have had my sink overflowing, been having to bail water out by bucket all these 3 days, and now I have sewage looking black sludge water in my sink that smells like poop." And I said, "Is anything being done about this?" And she's like, "Yeah, we tried to call you." I said, "I was at work." And she was like, "Yeah, so we had maintenance come by, and there's water line issues." And I said, "Okay, that's great, but what are y'all gonna do about my sink? This is sewage smelling water, and I cannot be in there. It smells so bad." She then tells me, "No, you don't have that in your sink." I said, "Excuse me?" I said, "Do you want to come and look at this?" And she's like, "No." And I said, "Are y'all going to get this sewage smelling water out of my sink?" She's like, "Well, there's not really anything we can do." I said, "Are y'all going to get this water up off my floor?" And she's like, "Well, we have maintenance, working on stuff." I said, "I cannot be in there." So long story short, we go round and round for a little bit. And I said, "Look, this is a health hazard. It would be a shame if a certain department had to get involved because y'all..." And she's like, "Well, it would be a shame too because we're trying to do something about it." I said, "Well, then get this stuff out of my sink." Well, I guess because I threw a certain department's name out there, they had maintenance over there really quick. And he'd been out to my apartment before when this first started happening months ago. And back then, he was trying to tell me that it was just a garbage disposal problem. Back then, I had pointed to, because the water was coming out of my dishwasher as well as the sink. And I said, "This is caused by a garbage disposal?" I said, "I don't think so." And he was like, "Well, yeah, this just happens sometimes." I said, "Whatever." And so anyways, the same maintenance guy comes by, and he's all like, "Oh, wow, we were in here earlier and it was not this bad." And I said, "Yeah, she was trying to tell me that I don't have this poop smelling water in my sink." He's like, "Well, it's not like sewer water, it's just old black sludgy grease." And I said, "That's great, but what are y'all going to do about this?" And he fell silent, and he was like, "Yeah, I just didn't know it was this bad." I said, "Again, what are y'all going to do about this? Are y'all going to get this water out of my apartment?" He's like, "Yeah, we're going to get this taken care of." And he's like, "So there's like a collapsed water line," which I had already predicted because I had looked it up. I have a degree to be a researcher. I research. So he's like, "Yeah, we're going to have to dig this whole line up. We're going to have to bring jackhammers into your apartment and tear up your neighbor's floor as well and everything." I said, "Okay, are y'all going to move me to another unit while y'all do this?" He's like, "No." And then I was like, after he was saying, if you put the work order as emergency, we would have been out here earlier and everything, immediately. I said, "I called y'all's emergency maintenance line and left a voicemail on there. He's like, yeah, like if you had done it as an emergency. I said, I put flooding in the voicemail. So this guy was trying to gaslight me. And then I was like, well, okay, I've never had to deal with this in all the places that I've lived. And this is where he got a bit derogatory. He was like, well, where have you lived? In a trailer? Are you kidding me right now? I said, I've lived a lot of places. I said, I've lived out in the country. I've lived in cities. I've lived in efficiency cabins. I've lived a bunch of other places. And he was like, yeah, well, is this your first time living in an apartment? I said, not really. And he was like, he fell silent. But so I'm here in a hotel for the next several days. I went to the office and I asked them, are y'all going to dock from my rent any of this? I have a flooded floor. Y'all aren't moving me to another unit. Are y'all going to dock anything off my rent for this? She's like, no. So I have told my story a bit on this channel and on my Facebook pages, my other platforms. So I'm a childhood and narcissistic abuse survivor. I have been in business leadership positions for about 13 years now. And so that means, and I've also had food license and for my small business before, and combining all those above, I really know regulations, I know legal things, I know health codes, I know a lot of stuff about what should and should not be done. And also being a narcissistic abuse survivor, I also pick up really quick on when I'm trying to be gaslighted. So the lady who works at the apartment was trying to gaslight me into the fact that I don't have, or I don't anymore. They finally got out there after I raised a ruckus and they drained out the sink. They put industrial dryers on my floor in the kitchen. But to tell me that I don't have black sewer smelling sludge water overflowing in my sink, I ain't playing that game. First off, you don't really know who you're messing with when you're saying stuff like that, because I don't play that game. Your tactics may work on other people, but they ain't gonna work on me, because I know my rights, I know my regulations, I know my health codes, and I'm not gonna be told by someone that I pay rent to that I don't have sewer smelling black sludge water in my sink. And I'm also not going to be told by their maintenance worker when I say that I've lived in a lot of places. His first thing to go to is, oh, so you lived in a trailer? First off, you have no idea my genetic makeup. You have no idea. And I am getting really tired. I'm probably going to take a lot of people off with this video, but I'm getting really tired just because I look a certain way that you're just going to assume that I lived in a trailer my whole dang life. Okay? Yeah, I grew up real poor. I've had to work my butt off since I was 16 years old. The little bit I did get in life, I lost because of a hate campaign against me and my partner for our all natural living. Because me, as a degreed historian with anthropology, who had been studying ancient genetics for a couple years prior to this experience, by now I've been studying ancient genetics and all that for about 7-8 years now. So because I knew how genetics works and I knew my health abnormalities, I have 3 food allergies that I had to figure out on my own because certain people were not taking me seriously when I would go to them about my symptoms. So I had to use eating journals to be able to figure out what was causing my severe reactions. And I have covered those on my other pages and everything. But long story short, I had to take my own health seriously because nobody else was. So I understand how genetics works because, I took biology in high school and college and have had a great interest in ancient genetics ever since the genetics field has really taken off in terms of the new technology we have available, the new sequencing and all the super cool stuff that is available now. And so I knew how heredity happens. I also have a genetic version of fatty liver disease, which I've also covered in a few of my other episodes and everything. So I knew how that was going to be passed on. But the community that he and I was living in, despite, and he's dead now because of his genetic autoimmune condition. But this community tried to tell us that it was all made up. Even though I had my blood work when my child was born that flagged all sorts of abnormalities, pinpointing to my liver, even though he had all his medical documents, even though I knew that with my food allergies, my child should never be anywhere near certain name brand formulas because can you imagine, I know how my reactions affect me. Can you imagine what that would do to a little baby? But this community wasn't going to have it. And it was all instigated by my childhood narcissistic abusers. And I don't know if they were trying to hide something about that maybe one of them isn't really my parent. I don't know, because I've taken 7 DNA tests and it's really foggy about who my father's line is. It appears that perhaps the woman who raised me is either my real mother or someone related to my real mother. It's even after 7 DNA tests, I still don't have complete answers. But one thing that instigated this whole hate campaign was the fact that my childhood narcissistic abusers found out that I was studying my own DNA lineage and everything. And part of them finding out was because after I got away from them in 2020, which I talked about in another video, feel free to check out all my videos. I don't just cover narcissistic abuse survivor. I have stuff of my travels on there, cooking, stuff from my small business, arts and crafts. Anything that I love, I put in a video. But So when they hunted me down in 2021, right after I had my child, they hunted me down because I found out that I had a child. Because for some reason they were getting mail for my child to their address instead of mine. But I'm not going to jump on that right now. But so they hunted me and him down. The woman was banging on our door saying that I'm not going to leave here until you let me in. I know you're in there. And so I turned to my now deceased partner and I said, look, I'm tired of running from them. We're going to play their game and we're going to see what this is all really about. Because in this whole year that we have been free from them, I've learned a lot about my, where I come from, as little as I could at that time. But yeah, so I opened the door and I told them, oh yeah, I've been looking into my my genealogy and all that stuff. And I said, there's a lot of holes in the stories that y'all were telling me growing up. And something really weird happened like in another state because the records get all kinds of weird out there. Y'all should have seen them. Like the man just lost his shit. He was like pacing all over the room, like he was spazzing out. But I said that to them because I wanted to see their reaction. And then just a few weeks later, they called certain officials, said that I was mistreating my child because I was not feeding her a name brand formula. I had chose to breastfeed her, and when my breast milk dropped, I was giving her a goat milk formula recipe to compensate for all that. Now, what I mean by that is that she was still getting breast milk. The goat milk formula was just to make up the additional feeding requirements that she needed that my breast milk was no longer doing. And after everything happened and I was emaciated for 6 months, I did research, and it turns out that if you have a C-section, it can horrendously impact your breast milk production. So, yeah, from 2021 to 2022, I lost my child because I was told that it would be in the best interest of the court case to let my child go. And there was one time, right, like maybe 3-4 months before my partner died, he was having mobility issues. I had to help him at one point walk into the courtroom. But the session before that, his lawyer was saying that because the judge was just getting so nasty, he was like, well, why haven't you like done anything that we have told you to? And mind you, we had, but they were just playing games. Like we were doing everything that they ask us to. And so my deceased partner's lawyer was like, he has a debilitating disease. He's been having to undergo treatments for it, dialysis for it. And the judge was like, well, he got in here today, didn't he? Oh my gosh. This man is dying, and you are mocking his health in a courtroom. So the next session, I had to help him walk into the courtroom. His body had declined that bad. Everybody changed their tune then. They were very deathly quiet. They watched him struggle to walk into the courtroom. And all they could say was, we're glad that you could join us today. After you mocked him for something out of his control that was in his DNA to have. And we are here today because none of y'all believed in our knowledge of genetics and how it affects so many things. But after Theo passed and I had to go to my own trial, that all changed because I got to present all my research about how his condition could have affected her, how my conditions could have affected her, and all the nutrition. I had even developed a mathematical formula to show that I was making sure that she got all her nutrition requirements. There was a session while he was still alive that his own family members tried to browbeat him and gaslight him into the fact that I didn't have the conditions that I have. And he vehemently fought on my behalf, despite the fact that he was dying of his own condition. He was defending me. The only consolation is that he's not in pain anymore. September will be 4 years since he passed. And when I say that moment was probably the most important research that I've ever had to present in my entire life, I mean it 110%. Because not only was I fighting for me, I was fighting for a man who died being mocked by a community, who lost his child because his conditions and mine were deemed fake. So yeah, I'm a narcissistic abuse survivor who had gaslight attempts on them by my childhood abusers, by an entire small community. And just so you know, after he passed, I moved far away from that place as soon as I had the resources to. And so when I have to deal with an apartment complex that uses derogatory language and tries to gaslight me into saying that no, I don't have black sludge water that smells like sewer in my sink. Yeah, you know, this isn't the first time that I've had to face this kind of behavior. This isn't the first time that I've had to stand up for my rights. And I'm not afraid to do so because in the country I live in, we have those rights, we have those regulations, and we have those codes to protect the citizens. So yeah, I've been wanting to tell a bit more about my story. I didn't quite think that I'd be doing it in this way, but yeah, they didn't even offer to move me into a different unit, so I am staying in an apartment for several days until it's hopefully done. And I'm just tired. I am tired of always having to fight for what's right. Thank you for tuning in and watching this.